Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending upon what part of the country you are at. We are recording this Saturday morning, so we have some news updates. If you're listening to us on 1.5 speed on podcast, don't forget you can see our pretty faces on YouTube. And for those, if you hear me yell or scream, we are recording this during the USA match, which unfortunately we are down 1-0. And I really would have liked Pulisic to put that first shot he took in and not give up that first shot goal to the Netherlands. But I got a little hope here, and hopefully we can come back and tie it up. So we got it on in the background. And if you hear an inaudible yell during the middle of this, it was because I was screaming and talking about that. We're here with Papy. So this week, Justin and I, we're going to break down the Steelers and Falcons game, and we're going to take a look back at last week where pivots were good, where pivots were bad, and talk about that. With that being said, I'm going to let Papy lead in here and let him talk about last week, where he did well, where he thinks he could have done better, and kind of give a quick recap of last week for us.
Yeah, so first I gotta remember here so I can be as accurate as possible. I'm so on to the next week. Been doing this so long that I gotta think back to last week. But no, last week I had a winning week overall, but it was a frustrating winning week because it was a min cash winning week that I thought was going to be a big week going into the 4 o'clocks before Jacobs erupted, and I didn't have nearly enough Jacobs. I had on one of my 3 entry max teams, I had Adams in that game that I had stacked. I decided to go him instead of Jacobs. So unfortunately, I only had Jacobs on I had 20 rosters. I only had Jacobs on, I think, 2 of them. So, and they weren't the ones that I had bet more on. So that was obviously tough, but I still did win. I cashed in the Wildcat on my main team. And that team, I played a Burrow, Higgins, Burks, fortunate fall on the ball in the end zone stack. So, it was a good stack. I debated if I wanted to go with how I wanted to play the Bengals. I actually had teams that I liked earlier in the week with Jamar Chase on it when it was up in the air if he was going to play, because I saw that his ownership was going to be really low. And, in a matchup where I thought they were going to throw the ball a ton, he could have hit for 40 and no one would have had him. So I was really eyeing Chase early in the week. Then when he was out, I pivoted to Higgins, and I had Hurst on my main team too. So I had Burrow, Higgins, Hurst, and then Burks. That was the stack I had on my main team. It wasn't a bad stack. Like I said, it was good enough to get in the money. But without Jacobs, you weren't going to win big.
That's crazy. I literally had the exact same stack, and I did the same pivot because I had the salary to Adams. So I made the pivot off of Jacobs. And something that's funny, I've been talking to Xanamir about, and he argues with me because the math over time says don't leave salary out. But if you really break down this year, like what the highest player totals were, if you're willing to be against the grain and leave some salary off, right? That's where you would do really well. And I had the money, and I was just like, okay, I have the money. He could go. And it's the first week I haven't played Jacobs like in a month. And of course he went nuclear, right? And while I did well, like I would have we could have had a crazy week if I would have stuck with Jacobs.
Yeah, I mean, if I would have had Jacobs on like my main roster, I would have hit huge, because it was a good roster. It was just missing him, and you couldn't win big without him. Yeah. So, that's why we talk about guys that can break the slate. If a guy breaks the slate and you don't have him, then a min cash is a victory. So, I'll take it. I had a couple of really good weeks in a row where I got top 10 in the power sweep the previous couple of weeks. So any win is a victory in DFS. So it wasn't a bad week, but it was a frustrating week. I definitely thought it was going to be a better week when we were going into the 4 o'clocks than it ended up being.
Yeah, and OneweekSeason, we did great overall. If you look at the leaderboards, right, we everybody did really well. It was just one of those, especially like right when I saw Jacobs 3% ownership, I am like, I am the dumbest DFS player in the history of the world. Like I'm terrible at this. I should quit playing.
I rolled my eyes pretty hard at myself when I saw that he was under 5%. I was like, I'm a moron. How did I not play him everywhere?
Right, when I've been playing him the whole time. Like I said, it was a salary thing for me. I had it. And one of the other big things I did is I did not pivot to the Jets defense on the news. I stuck to my guns there because I said, everybody's going to pivot now. Let me go get some leverage points, right? Mm-hmm. Like everybody's going to go, and they did, right? So many people moved, and I understand why they did, moved to the Jets on that news. and then it burnt them, right? Like
Mhm.
it could have been worse, but it was it definitely gave you some leverage there too.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, they were all right. I had the Jets and the Chiefs. I think were my two main defenses that I had last week, and I think they were similar, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were okay. Like they were getting murdered for a while. At the end, they got back to I think like 9 or 10 points. I don't
Right.
remember where they ended, but it wasn't. It didn't justify the ownership,
No,
right?
no, no. The
Right. It
Dolphins
didn't.
were the play.
Yeah, for sure. So that was a nice pivot. So we're going to talk about Justin's hometown boys this week, the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you've listened to us, if you've paid any attention to 1weekSeason, we talk about the Pickett stack. And just like how Fields broke the slate, we believe one of these weeks the Pickett stack is going to break the slate. And in a week where there's much higher game totals and there's a ton of opportunity with this coming in, what's going to be very low ownership, there's some really interesting things. And I'm going to let Justin here talk about what he wrote up a little bit, where he could see this going. And I'd like you to talk about a little bit too, those Falcons totals and how you broke that down in their games. I think that was a really good breakdown.
Yeah, so I was glad I got this game. I always like doing Steeler games because I am in the local market and a Steeler season ticket holder, and follow the Steelers a little more closely than any other team. Uh, so this was interesting. I looked at the total at first, and I kind of thought, I don't know how much I'm gonna really like this for DFS. And as I started to look more closely at it, I started to really like it for DFS a lot more than I thought. And when I was looking at it, I started looking at the things from the Falcons' perspective, and I looked at their point totals, and I realized that they play almost all competitive games, right? There's very few games that they play that aren't competitive, and they play high-scoring competitive games and low-scoring competitive games, which is interesting because teams that do that, in the Falcons in particular, if you were to look at some of the stat lines they've given up this year, they are typically separators on the slate, right? So in their
Right. Yep.
high-scoring games, typically separators. Now, whenever you look at, like, for instance, when the Falcons played the Bengals, we all remember Joe Mixon's eruption, kind of like
Yep.
Jacob's eruption in that game. He was obviously the separator in that game. But when you look at like a Bengals offense, they were pretty high priced. I mean,
Right.
everybody on the Bengals offense, you're always going to have to pay for. It's interesting in this game that you're able to target that same upside that you can usually take against the Falcons, especially through the passing game, and you can do it with a stack that costs really relatively nothing. I mean, Pickett, Pickens, and DJ together are 15K.
Right.
And this is a concentrated Steelers offense.
At under combined right now, they sit projected at 13% ownership combined between all three of them.
Yeah, I mean, so you think what your combinational ownership is going to be there? I mean, it's going to be nothing.
Right.
And so when you think about a stack that is incredibly cheap, has one of the best matchups that has yielded, stat lines that have been separators on the slate, and I know Najee's going to play, but he's got an oblique issue. He's a little bit slowed. They'll probably mix in the other guys a little bit more and maybe throw a little bit more.
Right.
If they come out and Pickett has his first, 300-yard 3 TD game, and those TDs two goes to Pickens and one goes to DJ, right? And DJ has 8 catches and 100 yards. I mean, that stack's going to win a lot of money. And you don't have to squint your eyes that hard to see it happening. And the other thing is, because the offense is concentrated and because everyone is so cheap and Pickett runs, there's really a reasonable floor on it too. I mean, even if it doesn't explode, there's a really good chance that they all get some catches, they all get some yards, and Pickett runs for 50 yards. And maybe you don't win the slate because of it, but because they're so cheap, if they get you a combined 45 points, which wouldn't be amazing, you're still not dead on the rest of your roster. So I don't see a lot of downside. I mean, to think that the downside would be they brick, like they totally brick. I just don't see them totally bricking. I really don't. And it kind of gives me vibes of last year. My best week of the year was the Bengals Ravens in week 16. And I wrote that game up too. And I stacked that game. I ended up getting 6th in the Millie Maker that week. And this kind of gives me vibes of that. A game where the Steelers are probably going to throw a little bit more than they have during the season. And people, don't expect that. The ownership's low. It's a perceived bad game environment, but it's probably a better game environment than people think. I mean, I'm getting a lot of vibes of that Week 16 last year. So I'm probably going to stack this game and do it on one of the teams I bet a reasonable amount of money on.
It'll be in my 3 max. Like we were talking about this before we came on air. I've been playing this stack every week. And if I didn't play it in my 3 max and it hits, I'll never forgive myself. Like, because I just believe it's going to hit. And this is right. There's so many other games, right? You go look at the afternoon slate, right? And you look at what teams are going, right? You got the Chiefs and Bengals, right? You got the Chargers at Raiders. There's just, there's some high scoring games in there, right? And if you look at the projections, you can see where it's going. And here's the crazy part. If we want to talk about, combined ownership on top of it, if you want to get wild and bring Drake London back, right? While Atlanta likes to run, right? The Steelers run D is solid, right? And not just solid, they're top 5 run D.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting healthy again. So if this goes, what's that mean? Atlanta's going to have to push the ball. And when they've thrown it. Drake London right now is only an additional $4,700 at projected 3.5% ownership. So, right. So we're going to get under 17% ownership, right? In a under 20K price point and have 4 players. If this goes, right, the pivot advantage when we're talking about game theory and opportunity, right? The leverage you're going to have on the field is so big. I would argue you'll probably be able to look back at like history of leverages and not, and find that in a top 10 if it actually hit.
I kind of agree with that. The ownership is so low here, and I get it. I mean, there's a lot of other appealing spots with high totals on the slate. And so people are going to pretty much look at this total and say, why would I want to stack this game up when there's all these other good games I can stack? I really think it's going overlooked. And like you said, London being the guy who everybody thinks he's a disappointment this year, right? Like nobody wants anything to do with London.
Marcus Mariota is his quarterback.
yeah.
Like say that out loud and tell me what your expectation of a stud wide receiver is.
Right. And if you've really watched the games, I have Sunday Ticket, a bunch of TVs. I really watch all these games. London is a good football player. And again, this is why it gives me those vibes of last year, because I remember writing about the Bengals and they were a run heavy team last year. And I remember going into the game and saying, everybody thinks this is a run heavy team, but all these receivers in Burrow are good football players. If they come out and decide to throw, there's a good chance it's going to work. So London doesn't have the stats because all Atlanta wants to do is run. And they've been in a lot of close games where they can just run. And Mariota's the one throwing them the ball. But if the Steelers say come out and fire away 2 touchdowns in the first half and are up 14-0, London could see 8 to 10 targets. If London sees 8 to 10 targets, he's going to be a difference maker. And he could, way more so than 3% ownership at 4,700 indicates. I mean, let's remember, he's still a wide receiver 1 at under 5K in a plus matchup. Like all those things are still true here. So, I really think that it's going overlooked. And I think even if you want to really get frisky, something that I mentioned in the article too, is that you could put the Steelers D in on these stacks. And you could do that because the Jets, I think, are going to be the number 1 owned D, and they're the same price. And so it's immediate pivot there. And then the other thing about it is the Steelers D is healthy. And when the Steelers D is healthy, it's really good. They have the highest salary cap dollars spent in the league on defense. The problem is that these guys are always hurt. They're not hurt anymore for the most part. So there's a chance that, the Steelers D has a good game where the Falcons have to throw, and London still has a good game. Like you could play the Steelers D on a roster with London, and at 2,600, if you do that, you can pretty much play anyone else you want.
Right. So, we're looking at Steelers, Titans, Jets as the top D's projected from an ownership, standpoint right now. So, and no one's going to do what Justin just talked about, right? No one is going to play the Steelers D and that stack with it. Like you're going to have less than 0.1. Nobody's like, that's going to be nothing as far as that goes. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now versus listening, we got some stats up we're showing that show the combined Falcons points totals. that come over to YouTube, check it out. You can see it. This is in our paid area, but the numbers in there are pretty awesome when you start looking at some of the other things. So if you're listening on podcasts, I'm not going to share it with you because I'm going to make you come over and watch us on YouTube. But the numbers there really add up and make sense. So let's talk about chalk, though, in this game, right? Right now, I love Pat, right? He's been a stud, big fan, and he's projecting, highest ownership on the slate right now. What this stack also does is going to give you a pivot at tight end, right? Like this, if you say, okay, hey, he's the highest owned, right? To be highest owned, while his price is good, to hit, right, we're going to need 2 TDs out of him. And if he gets there, your stack isn't getting there anyways, right? So the pivot off of that, I think, is huge. Are you going to try to work any lineups in? Because I know you do more 20 maxes with Pat in the stacks. How are you going to play that?
Yeah, so I've been debating if I want to put him in the stacks or not. I do like him as an individual play, and there's a very good chance he will be on some more rosters that I'm betting more on as an individual play. I like him less in the stacks because of what you just alluded to, that you're essentially gaining more leverage off of him as the highest owned tight end by not including him and putting a different tight end in there. And so the tight end I've been trying to do that with in the rosters I've played around the most with is actually Kittle. And I've been doing that because, to me, he's a guy that could score 40 points. And there's not a lot of tight ends that can score 40. And when I see a tight end that can score 40, and like you said, Freiermuth is going to be, the most popular tight end, or is projected to be, if you run a Pickett, Pickens, DJ stack, and then you put Kittle in there, to me, there's a ton of upside on that roster and really low ownership. And you're kind of gaining even more leverage by saying, hey, if Freiermuth doesn't get it, who's going to be super popular, and Pickett, DJ, and Pickens do, well, then who's going to be the best tight end? Imagine then if Kittle explodes and does one of his Kittles where he gets 40, your roster is looking really strong and it's not going to be popular. So
against a $1,600 more Andrews at a like $3,000 more. I think it's actually $2,900 more Kelsey, right? I think Kelsey's 7,900 on DK this week.
Mm-hmm.
And so, right. So then on top of that, right. So next thing you know, right, you've spent 20, and you have it stacked with London, right? You've spent less than $25,000, right? For those 5 players, you can play whoever else you want the rest of. It doesn't matter who it is. Price doesn't matter anymore for the rest of your roster.
Doesn't.
Right. And, one of the things Mike and I talked about in the breakdown on the Dolphins game is, right, the interview, they showed, it wasn't an interview, but the clip they showed this week where McDaniel came out with the Dolphins and said, I'm just going to throw it on every play, right? Everybody knows what the Niners' strength is. It's their run D, right? Just like everybody knows that's what strength is. Why are you going to run at it, right? I don't believe McDaniel's going to run at it, right? He's going to take he's going to take Tyreek and Waddle and go at him. And if you look at the data, Kittle's big games has come in those type of games, right? And if it forces Jimmy to throw, it'll go there. This is a week I personally like getting really weird, right? Like I'm probably going to stack Jimmy G this week with Kittle, and depending upon if Debo's really good to go, pivot to Debo, because this is where, right, we know McCaffrey isn't super healthy, and we get Debo where he gets 5 to 7 carries on top of his 8 targets, right? This could be a classic Debo type week where, right, and then we stack back, right, with the Steelers D.
Right. And I was going to say, you could throw Steelers D on that. I actually really like combining those two, this game, the Steelers-Falcons game, and the Dolphins-49ers game. Those are probably my 2 favorite games when I'm looking at where I think ownership is not going to reflect the upside of both games, and where I think there's more certainty than people are giving credit for. Like you said, I think the Dolphins are going to throw the ball, and Kittle tends to have his 40-point Kittle games in games that are not, the Niners are just going to grind you down and play defense there, where the other team can score, the other team can throw the ball. And I think that's what we have here. And then when you look at the Falcons, I mean, and the Steelers, I really think the Steelers are going to throw the ball more than they usually do here. it's hard to give Tomlin credit that he can figure that out because he's not a great coach. But I just think the running backs are a little bit banged up, and the price on these guys in DFS does not reflect the matchup and their upside. So I think combining those two games, you can get some really low owned teams that have a lot of upside. And again, like we're saying, none of these guys we're talking about are high priced guys, right? So you can play like all the high priced running backs. You could throw AJ Brown in there if you think he's going to get his revenge. I mean, like you can play guys that are like 8K, 2 of them, 3 of them in some cases, and they fit on these rosters. So
if you run that stack, right? If you run the Pickett stack with Kittle, right? And then you can bring Tyreek back, right? To stack that game, right? And you don't have, it doesn't, the money isn't going to be an issue, right? And I just, again, I think people are going to look at so many other games, right? We got Deshaun's revenge game, right? So let's look at, I'm going to pull up ownership, right? Projected ownership right now. So on like the top guys of the slate, right? Right now, we're still looking at St. Brown, Wilson, Jacobs, Etienne, Eckler, Kirk, Zay, Walker, Pat, Cooper, Adams, right? Like you're going to have, right? And these are only going to rise, right? This is Saturday morning, right? So we're going to start seeing some big updates here as we get into tonight and tomorrow morning. But that's, if you're pivoting off of all these, right?
Yeah. So chalk talk real quick. I have seen that Jaguars Detroit game is supposed to be like chickadee chalk, right? Like everyone's on it.
Massive.
I'll be honest with you. I don't get it. I think that is some of the most fragile chalk we're going to see in DF. I mean, this is Detroit and Jacksonville, guys. I say it slowly. Just remember, Detroit and Jacksonville, guys, are the chalk this week. Like you don't almost need to. That should ring in your ear. Like, hey, if everybody wants to load up on the Lions and Jaguars, like maybe I should look somewhere else because I really think that game is fragile. Like, could it explode? Yeah, of course it could explode. But like for the ownership that I'm seeing on these guys, I mean, that game could just be a dud because it's Detroit and Jacksonville. Like just that does not scream shootout to me. Like Chiefs Bengals, I feel more like is one of those games where it's like, all right, like that game's probably gonna have a lot of points. But like if the Jaguars game is just a dud, like I just don't see that as that shocking. And when I'm seeing this ownership, it's kind of crazy to me. I see it as very fragile, that game.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. I don't understand in the overstack. So I get it. If you're going to play it, right, just stack ETN and St. Brown and move on, right? If that's what you want, just grab those two and go and move on. But looking at like the actual ownership, right, like at quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is projected the highest owned quarterback on the slate, right? Goff is 5th right now. So, right. I listen, and I love Doug Peterson. Doug has done an amazing job, right? You can see, right, the progress Lawrence has made this year. And I think moving forward, there's huge upside. But they have 4, right? They have 4 receivers. They don't have an alpha that's commanding targets, right? Look at, Zay finally went last week, right? Which was great for my best ball teams. But, right, like there's not going there. Like, the crazy part of this is look at it, let's talk about some chalk ownership, right? No, the one that's blowing me away right now is Mike White is currently projected above the following quarterbacks this week. Okay. He's projected above Jalen Hurts, Jimmy, Pickett, Lamar, Fields, Tua.
Yeah.
Right?
Crazy.
Like
crazy.
That's and let alone Lawrence in there, right? I understand that Deshaun Watson, they're playing Houston, but the guy hasn't really played a game in 2 years. I get it, right? I can see it, but I don't love it. But right now I start looking at, okay, Burrow, Herbert, Burrow, Mahomes, right? I like Herbert, Carr, right there. I just think there's so many opportunities. And then we get back to the game we're talking about, right? And then you start scrolling all the way down, looking at ownership going, man, like I think there's like some opportunity, right? As far as that goes.
I think there's a ton of opportunity this week in terms of ownership. And if I'm going to go with a more popular QB that, I feel like Burrow is my guy because like I said, that Chiefs game, at least I feel like there's probably going to be some points in that Chiefs game. So like, if I'm going to go popular, I'll go Burrow. I just can't imagine going Lawrence at the highest ownership in a game where I just do not feel super confident that game is going to explode. And then, like you said about all their receivers, like there really isn't an alpha, and none of them are super cheap either. So when you think about if you want to play Lawrence, who do you want to play him with? Like you're doing a lot of guesswork. Right. You're hoping you're going to get that right. You might not. It might be all Marvin Jones. Like you don't know.
Right.
And again,
what if it's Kirk? Right? What if it's Kirk? What if it's even better? What if it's 1 to Kirk, 1 to Zay, 1 to ETN?
Yeah.
Right. Like, sure, Lawrence got you there, but your stacks are dead because it's not condensed.
And they're not cheap. I mean, Kirk's over 6K. I mean, they're not. Right. It's not like these guys are taking. Like when I look at Kirk over 6K at high ownership versus DJ or Pickens at 5K at low ownership, like that's such an easy decision to me.
Right.
Like, that's not hard. I'll take DJ and Pickens at no ownership against the Falcons like all day long when there's really only two. Fryermuth too, but really only 2 receivers they throw to on that team versus the Jaguars who spread the ball around. And they cost a lot more. And again, everyone's on them. I'm just surprised. I mean, this is reminiscent to me, like Zay Jones hit last week. Like this is reminiscent to me of old school DFS when it was like whoever hit the week before was going to be super chalk, and it was like you just pivoted off of them and you had a big advantage. DFS has gotten sharper than that over the years. I feel like this is a throwback to that.
Right. Well, look how everybody pivoted off of Jacobs last week, right?
Right.
Jacobs had a couple rough weeks in the nut matchup, and right, and then everybody pivoted off of him. So I think there's some. I think everybody likes to use the term galaxy brain, right? I think people are starting to overthink it a little bit. They're starting to go, because I've been keeping track of it a little bit on a side project for myself.
That's interesting.
We're starting to see that while people have gotten sharper, there's so much data. They're trying to overcome it with, okay, I'm going to pivot this weird way. And I think that's where some good opportunities at.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure it's some interesting data you have over there. I mean, I'm just more saying what I kind of have observed, but I've never really kept track.
Yeah, I've been keeping track this year. Like I'm keeping track of like where it's going, and like each week I'm adding up. Like I go and grab all the top players. Like what was the highest projected score? Here's the crazy part: is how much if you were just not totally correlated and playing the best plays, how much salary you should actually be leaving on the table this year.
I bet you it's a lot. I bet you it's a lot this year.
There's a lot of weeks it's been $44,000 to $46,000 is all you should have played.
That's
right?
Crazy.
And the cool part that I think we do at 1weekSeason is we have we call it the bub contest, bottom up build, right? And I do it every week as an exercise to get me to look at plays that I probably wouldn't normally look at. And I'll just tell everybody, this is, the Steelers is my bub, right? Like I'm using the Steelers in my bub. That stack is going in there too. And I'll have to go back and track. I believe my bub lineup so our bub lineup bottom up build is we require that you leave $6,000 on the table. It's been a great tool that JM came up with. I think it's like super valuable. It's made me a better DFS player to look at games that way. And I play it in a couple real contests every week. It's cashed over 50% of the time this year.
Wow, that's something.
Right? That's like crazy when you start thinking about it. But if you get those bottom guys right, it really comes down to, did you get those bottom guys right? And the salary it opens up has been good. So it's a really good exercise. And I think it goes back to what we're talking about here is like, we're not just saying, hey, this is why, just go play this, right? Blindly trust us. But here's the game theory why. And that's why these write-ups go up. And, they're available to us on the site and it's there. So as we're ending up here, I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
All right. Who is some of your favorite prop plays this week? Give me one or two. And then I got one more follow-up to that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'm just going to go right back to the well here. I mean, I like the overs on the Steelers receiving yards.
Yeah.
I mean, I just glanced at them the other day. I don't know if they've moved, but they were all, I think, like under 50.
Yeah, they were like 40. I think it was 44 early in the week on a couple of them.
Yeah, I bet them earlier in the week, and I don't bet a ton of props on my own. I have a guy who will send me some props because I just don't spend a ton of time there other than looking at them to use them for DFS. But when I do, I usually like them. And I do think that the Steelers receiving yards, I think they're going to get 50 yards receiving. So I think the overs there are good.
So we haven't talked about a ton, but I assume you have a fair share of best ball teams this year.
Yeah, as many as they'll let me have, pretty much.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, me too. So here's the question: who do you need? Like, who's your one or two guys that you need? Right, we're in week 13. We're hitting crunch time. Who do you need these next 2 weeks to really make sure you get into the playoffs? Who's going to make or break some of your, not the teams that you're cruising with in first, and second, but your teams that are in that third, fourth, fifth spot that are on the bubble?
Christian Watson. I was heavy on him.
Okay.
I think an underdog. I had him at over 20% of my teams. I thought he was going to become this earlier in the year,
Right.
but now
It's
that
going well now.
it's going well now. Yeah, it's going well now. But a lot of those teams have been wrecked, unfortunately. But the ones that are still there, and because I have him on a lot of teams, right, and because he's been doing well lately, a lot of these teams are starting to make a push. And at the end of, as we're coming into the end here, like if he has another big week, he could get me there. Because I think one thing that's interesting about best ball is I've tracked best ball really close this year because this is my first year I played best ball, 150 lineups on Underdog, 150 on DK. Bunch on FFPC, right? Like this is my first year really playing a lot of best ball. So I've tried to pay attention to it so I can learn. And, as I'm looking at best ball, it's interesting. You see, guys that hit the IR and then come off the IR, guys that don't play for a good chunk of the season and then come in. I feel like they're going to have a lot of value in the final rounds because there's going to be less ownership there. The guys who are the high advance rate guys like Josh Jacobs, right? You got to figure he's going to be a ton of chalk when you get to the playoffs because a ton of Jacobs rosters are going to advance. So I feel like rosters where you have guys like Watson who's coming on late, but rosters are dead because he did nothing for the first 9 or 10 weeks. Or Keenan Allen's another guy that I was super heavy on who got hurt and didn't play all year. And I have teams that have carried his butt all the way now that are going to qualify. Like, boy, can he just please have a big couple of weeks here to end the season. Jameson Williams, another one from Detroit.
Yeah, I got a bunch of Jameson.
I got a bunch of him on teams where I drafted him thinking that he would be back probably around week 9 or 10. And then here we are, we're back. It's later than obviously I anticipated. Most people anticipated, but I have some teams that dragged him, and are going to get there. So like, hey, boy, can he come back and have a big couple of games? So I think those guys who didn't do anything that are now coming on or were hurt and are now coming back, like those are the guys I probably really need.
Yeah, I'm I've talked about a couple of other pods this week. I'm heavily invested in Fields and Komet. So one of the cool things though is I stacked a ton of Miami and Chicago because
I have a lot of Miami. I'm all over Miami
because of where I was getting them, right? Where, we've talked about it. I could draft Reek in the third. Then I got him in the second, right? I don't know that I really had to draft Tyreek in the first round anywhere. Like, I don't think I think he got towards the turn at the end, but by then I was pretty much done. Right. So I have a ton of Reek with Tua, and then, right, because later on I was getting Fields so cheap, right, and I was bringing them with Komet, and same Komet started off real slow. Obviously, he's turned it on, so I really have some exposure there. One miss that's killing me that I'm really like he just can't stay healthy. He's such a tease is Tony, right? Like I'm super exposed, and I was at the same time, you talk about, hey, I got some teams that have carried there, and if he can get hot, right, if he can get back and get healthy, right, like he has the opportunity in those 15 through 17, he can break the game, right, with the Chiefs, right, because you never know who it's going to go to. So that one's big for me. I have a ton of Deshaun. I took the gambles, right, when everybody was giving me a hard time about it. And I just said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to get him at real low ownership. And if he comes back and can play halfway decent, right. I actually have, this is what's crazy. I have some Fields to Deshaun Watson stacks. So
yeah, those
right, because I have them with Cooper, right, and same, right. I was getting Amari in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, right, like because of where I was getting them. So those guys are kind of big for me. It's interesting when you brought up about the injury thing, right? Look at what Rashad did last year, right? For Liam, right? You carried him at the end in that in that Detroit Seattle game, right? But you had to have that, you needed the week 16 stack to get to 17, right? You had to have the Bengals, but then everybody had the Bengals. And what did you have, right, in week
Right.
17 to set you apart? So, right, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over, the next 5 weeks and where we end up at.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the bet. Like I said, best ball is my first year really going hard, and I'm going to be back next year. So I'm interested to see. I'm going to have plenty of teams to get through the first round, and I can't wait to
Yep.
see what happens.
Yeah, I'd like to. So I had in baseball this year, I made the finals in every contest, and I almost banked one of the bunts at underdog. I was really close, and Jordan just went ice cold. Jordan carried me in baseball, so that was it was encouraging to see, because I actually used some of that correlation into football, and now I'm going to be interested to match that data, right? Like how that data goes back and forth, and who can get us there. Because right, baseball's such a longer season, and injuries, just like football, they'll play a difference. So I'm interested to see how it plays. But that's all I want, right? Just give me the final and give me a shot. That's all I want, right? Even if it's just a 1, 2, 3, I don't care how many. I mean, of course I want more, but right, just get me in the final. Let me have a crack at it.
Yeah, I might have to talk to you offline about baseball, fantasy, best ball baseball, because I play fantasy baseball yearly, but I just have reduced it to one team over the years because it's such a pain in the butt to run a fantasy baseball team all year long. So best ball for baseball might be the way I end up going with my fantasy baseball future.
So I'm 100% going no season longs this coming year. This will be, I'm totally cutting it out. I cut it down a ton this year, and I'll play DFS when I want to, and right, and then I can play right, and then I have all my best ball, and it was great. And I didn't go crazy on it last year. I'm going to draft a lot more this year. I think there's a lot of arbitrage opportunity there. And so yeah, let's talk about it. And one that leads us a perfect ending. 1 week season's going to have some really cool best ball content that's going to be coming out right after the season that gets us, lined up going forward. There's going to be rankings, podcasts. We're going to have some really cool stuff we bring forward. That's not only for best ball, but we're going to also have baseball prop stuff that we have some correlated data we can show how we've done over the last few years.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, DFS baseball, I play the first month like every day, and then it's not as juicy after the first month, so I tend to cut back. But my first really big win was actually DFS baseball, not
Me too.
football. Yeah.
Yeah, my first contest, like big contest I ever took down, was a Sunday night showdown for baseball. So
yeah, mine was on Sunday. It was a main slate. I remember. I think it was a Game of Thrones season was premiering because I was excited for that, and then I got a lot more excited when I won a big DFS tournament. But
yeah, it was Cody Bellinger at captain that got me there. And it was the Dodgers versus Reds. I remember that win specifically because it was my first real win in a big GPP.
Me too, man.
Yeah,
Me too.
I'd never forget that one. So
I had a Marlin stack. I was over at my parents on Sunday for dinner. I was sitting outside sweating bullets. Neil Walker, my Pittsburgh man, got a single in overtime to win it for me. You don't forget those. You remember them forever.
Yeah, Cody had a steal that got me the win. Cody actually had a stolen base in that game that got me the points to get me over. So like I said, it's funny how you'll just never forget those.
Never forget it.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. See you guys.